This week on Talking Politics.
Trump Gaza shining bright.
Donald Trump shares a provocative Gaza vision.
I almost can't believe it's happening.
It's quite scary that the leader of the free world is sharing AI content.
The political battle on TikTok hots up.
I'll give them some advice. Be less boring.
Anything that gets people angry does really well on TikTok.
And the challenges mount for Keir Starmer.
He doesn't want to choose between the European Union and America.
Who is Keir Starmer and what does he stand for?
Welcome to the show. I'm Paul Brand and I'm joined here in the studio by Anushka while Robert is in Washington. He'll be along later, but with us is also our digital politics reporter and king of TikTok, I'm told, is your official title now, Lewis. Yeah. That's Lewis Denison. As you know, we've been inviting you to send your questions for Robert and Anushka in recent episodes, and I'll be asking some of those later on. But first, there's only one place to start today.
You free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one.
That's stuck in my head now, but for those of you listening, that is a video that Donald Trump has shared on his Truth Social account, reimagining war-torn Gaza as a beach resort with bearded belly dancers, Elon Musk tucking into some snacks, and President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu on sunbeds. Anushka, how did you enjoy that?
I mean, I feel like you missed some of the key points there, you know, like the giant golden statue of Donald Trump, the kid holding the golden balloon. I mean, it sort of would be funny if it wasn't completely absurd. We've just had a war in which tens of thousands of people have died, and President Trump posts that. I mean,
it's just a weird thing to repost. I mean, presumably someone else made it and then he's reposted it or something?
I mean, I guess so. But also at the end, that scene where it's him and Benjamin Netanyahu sitting on sunbeds. I'm like,
topless.
This is quite a sensitive political situation.
Yeah.
The people in Gaza probably don't think Netanyahu's on their side. And, you know, I remember watching him where he did this... I spend quite a lot of nights watching Trump's diatribe. Do you? And
it's quite fun, isn't it?
I mean, it's almost like I almost can't believe it's happening. I almost can't believe it's real. And I was listening to one where he suddenly said, you know what, let's have a midday deadline for Trump, for all the hostages going back. And if not, all hell will break loose. And I'm like, do you understand that you're the most powerful person in the world?
He just speaks off the cuff. And I feel like he probably just posted that video off the cuff. Someone showed him it and he thought, that looks pretty cool, maybe I'll share that. But I mean, I also, when I first seen it, I reacted, I thought it was a little bit funny until I realised what was actually going on. And then it's quite offensive. And also it's quite scary that the leader of the free world is sharing AI content on his own social media page.
Also just gives you another insight into his ego, right? Like, as Anushka said, the big gold statue. Like, who else would retweet an AI video of themselves represented as a gold statue? I mean, like, surely it's just not cool to do that, is it?
Do you remember in Back to the Future, didn't they, like, imagine a world where Trump was president? And it just was so unlikely. And it feels like we've just now entered the world that Back to the Future once imagined.
I'm sure The Simpsons has already done this as well.
I think they did have him as, didn't the Simpsons have him?
Yeah. So, Lewis, anyway, you've been looking at social media more generally, as you do day to day in your job, covering politics on social media. What have you been finding out? Because you've got some really interesting findings looking at all the different slants of the different social media platforms.
So I spend a lot of time on social media. I must admit, I don't spend too much time on Truth Social. So I have to just get Trump's content from Truth Social onto the other platforms. But that sort of stuff is awash on TikTok and Instagram. We're seeing AI videos, we're seeing things that aren't really true all the time. So there was one famous video of a campaign group called Everyone Hates Elon, which shared a video of them putting an advert somewhere in London. And it's got a picture of Elon Musk with his famous salute, and they call it the swastika. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side of it, there's so much fake content, AI-produced content by groups on the right, such as the AfD in Germany, the party that came it got its biggest ever election win recently. They shared a video of migrants, an AI video of migrants being deported onto a plane, and it was the youth wing of the AFD, and I think that's quite interesting, the fact that TikTok is dominated by the youth, and this sort of content is getting gobbled up by those people, and they seem to really like it.
And it worked in the election for the AFD. I mean, there are quite a few young people voted for the AFD, and similarly here, Reform UK has now got a decent following among the young, which you'd expect from a hard right party, if they'd allow me to call them a hard right party, Reform UK. You wouldn't expect that normally to appeal to the young, who tend to be more left wing. So it's kind of changing people's politics as well in a way, isn't it?
Well, I definitely think young people's politics is changing, and we have this whole kind of bro vote going to the right. But it's just fascinating the way that people are looking at this content. So that Trump video on TikTok, presumably, would the absurdity actually help it and make it something that goes further and that more people engage with?
I think that's part of it, yeah. It's the way algorithms work on all social media is it's about engagement. And so if you see a video that you think's ridiculous, you're likely to comment on it. And then that just means that more people are going to see it. But I found it really interesting that TikTok is mostly, most of the comments I've seen are from right-wing accounts supporting things that relate to Elon Musk and relate to Donald Trump and relate to Nigel Farage. Whereas if those same videos were posted on Instagram, you get people with a left-wing perspective reacting negatively.
Is Instagram not more neutral?
It feels to me like Instagram is centre-left, TikTok is right.
Well, it's interesting because when I look at Instagram, I don't see it as that political. I just see it as,
Yeah, see, I think because you're probably using Instagram for your personal life. So, so you're probably using Twitter still for politics.
I need your help. That's what I need. Will you teach me how to do TikTok?
Are people using Twitter for politics anymore, though? Because I don't find it useful anymore.
So I actually deleted, I still have an account, but I deleted it from my phone a couple of months ago because it just felt so... The reason I had it for so many years was because it was useful. Keir Starmer tweets a thing, that's news.
Exactly.
Yeah, and these days it felt like it was to me just a lot of conspiracy theories, and it wasn't that useful. So I moved over to TikTok, and there's a lot of that on there, but I feel like ITV is doing it as well, all the other newspapers. We're trying to get some trustworthy news onto TikTok, but and make it in a fun way. So it's...
See, I like Blue Sky now. I know I'm a bit of a nerd to switch to Blue Sky, but I just find that I can find news so much more easily because it's not polluted with...
the opposite of X? I just feel like I go on X and it's all this gang, and I go on Blue Sky and it's all that.
There's definitely that going on, but on Blue Sky you can at least find news, whereas I found on X you couldn't find news content anymore. It's so buried, the algorithm buries it beneath Elon Musk's tweets. And...
Somebody said to me that Elon Musk had, when he was going on about grooming gangs in the UK and he was becoming very radicalised about it, was like patient X of the Twitter algorithm, because basically the algorithm will have continuously pushed that to him.
Give us some examples of who plays well on TikTok.
Well, it's the people speaking loudly on either side, and so unfortunately for Labour and the Conservatives, they're not performing too well on TikTok at all. The ones on either side, Reform, they do really well. Nigel Farage does really well. There was one moment in the comments where Lee Anderson, he raised a question, and it's got about 2 million views on our page, and it went everywhere.
The new health minister has stated that it's okay for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
So he was asking the Health Secretary about one of the new health ministers who previously said that if someone identified as a llama, they should be respected, which sounds... to most people sounds crazy.
Yeah, I mean, no one is actually identifying as llama, though.
No.
I mean, what this is a dig at trans people,
I think they are, though.
Who's identifying as a llama? Come on.
I thought that. It's not true. But then someone told me at the school that their kids are at, 2 people are identifying as cats.
Yeah,
and there's that guy in Japan who identifies as a dog.
They're allowed to come in with
though.
little cat ears, apparently.
Okay, all right.
The thing is, it's like a question that's designed for TikTok. Is they probably thought we're not really going to get a good answer on this, or an important answer, but it's going to get loads and loads of views on TikTok. So that's one thing. I interviewed the Chancellor a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, we spoke about lots of things, and I asked her about youth unemployment, which is an issue that's every time that's on TikTok, every time we do a story on it, it goes massive. And she gave quite a dull answer that it would have done nothing on Twitter, but because there's so many young people on TikTok, she said that the million or so young people that are unemployed, they need to step up and get a job, and here it is. Hundreds of thousands of young people are out of work at the moment. How are you going to solve that?
There's around 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. That's what we inherited from the Conservatives at the general election. I want to make sure that everyone who can work is in work or in training. Jobs are there, and we need young people to step up and fill them.
And people just reacted furiously to that, as you would imagine. People were saying, well, for one, have you ever worked a hard day in your life? Why should I go and take a job that I haven't trained for? Which is part of the problem, I think, with the youth unemployment, is lots of people could get a job, but they've gone to university with a certain degree. But it's like I said earlier, anything that gets people angry does really well on TikTok.
Yeah. And Lewis is so knowledgeable that Number 10 even asked for your advice.
They did, yeah. They invited us into Number 10 to talk about TikTok. So this was a couple of months ago. They wanted
to offer you a job.
No, they tried to poach me, and I said, "Get away."
Did they?
No, they didn't.
It never ends well.
It never ends
Not yet.
well.
Anyway, they were asking us about what sort of stories perform well on TikTok, so they know whether to offer a story to a newspaper or to try and get it on TikTok. But the interesting thing at the time was that TikTok is banned by the government, so they wanted advice, but they weren't actually allowed to create any TikTok
on government
phones,
Yeah.
and they're not allowed to use government Wi-Fi to access TikTok.
So they have to pop over to the pub to do their TikTok.
Exactly.
Pop
yeah,
back.
but now they've changed the rules, or they've decided that it's necessary for communication for the government to have its own TikTok account. So they've lifted the rules for themselves, but
Never mind if there's a bit of Chinese spying.
Exactly, it's fine.
I can't believe they asked you for advice. I'll give them some advice. Be less boring.
We're doing the talking, but we want you to ask the questions. So email us at talkingpolitics@itv.com. We now have Robert in Washington for us. And we have got a question here from someone who's been watching the podcast on YouTube, and they simply want to know, how can any British people still support Trump after what's happened in the past few weeks? And that is Starmer's challenge, isn't it, to some degree, Robert? The British people generally aren't huge fans of Donald Trump. Some are, of course, but polling suggests we're not major supporters of Donald Trump in the UK. How is Starmer going to tread that line, trying to placate the president but not upsetting the domestic audience here?
So it's a sort of issue-by-issue approach by him. I mean, one of the things that some people would say is a bit cynical and depressing about what they've just done in slashing the aid budget, for example. And we should be no under illusion that although slashing the aid budget wasn't done as a favour to Donald Trump, the fact that he and his sidekick, world's richest man, Elon Musk, have just initiated effectively dismantling almost in its entirety their equivalent of their aid program, USAID. That in itself just changed the whole nature of global debate about the kind of responsibilities of rich Western nations when it comes to helping nations that are struggling. I think that has helped, in a sense, Keir Starmer make this hugely controversial cut as a sort of political backdrop to it. But the other thing that is, in a sense, motivating them is when they do the polling on this, and some people would say this is really depressing, British people are not, frankly, much in favour of overseas aid. 64, I think the last poll I saw said something like 64% of British people said if there have to be cuts, overseas aid is the first thing you should cut. So, you could argue that Keir Starmer is just being cynical in playing short-term electoral politics.
And it does pose the question that you and I have talked about before on this podcast, Anushka, who is the real Keir Starmer, right? If he's willing, as you say, to cut aid to 0.3% when he's previously argued it shouldn't have been slashed from 0.7 to 0.5,
Yeah,
then what does he stand for?
Yeah, I think that is the issue that he has with this. What should you cut? People say international aid, number one, welfare, number two, the environment, number three. Although, by the way, they say defence, number four. We should probably pass that one on to Downing Street. And so I think, Robert's right. They've looked at that. They know it's popular. They've decided now they're in power that it's the thing that they want to do. But who is Keir Starmer and what does he stand for becomes harder if 3-4 years ago he could argue so passionately for one thing and then so easily turn in a different direction. And I do think that there's a kind of bigger picture problem for him still, which is that people are sort of grappling to understand who he is, what's his vision, although they've clearly made the decision in Downing Street that it's just so popular to do this. And if you talk to people, it is incredibly... Most people will say, well, why are we sending money away when we need it for people here? But it's even more inflated than it looks, this cut, because a lot of the money, aid money, increasingly has been actually used for asylum seekers in the UK. So even less of it is going abroad. So I do think it is... I do think it absolutely raises the question you've had. And just worth throwing in, I was talking to people inside the Foreign Office yesterday. They thought they were going to be getting more money in the spending review for international aid. That's what they were pitching towards, based on the manifesto, based on the mood music. And it was like a sudden, we've got to get ready for this Trump meeting. And the thing we were talking about before, the way that people communicate, social media, like a lot of young people, presumably, are not that pro this sort of move.
Well, I just feel like it's quite a nuanced argument to say, international aid is good because it will prevent a war in 20 years' time. I think a lot of people think, well, there's a war going on now and we need to fund it, and why should we be sending money to foreign countries that we don't even know what their problems are?
But hang on a second. But just on that, though, Lewis, the argument is... It's partly about trying to maintain stability in these countries, but that has an immediate benefit, which is there ought to be, if you're helping countries remain stable, fewer people leaving those countries and wanting to claim asylum in the UK, and a lot of British voters are concerned about that. Equally, the more we help these countries develop, the bigger they become as potential markets for our exporters. And just two. Could I just make two little very quick points before we lose that issue about British people not particularly liking Trump? British people do, however, and all the polling shows this, whether or not they like Trump personally, they don't think that on the whole, the UK should be hostile to America. And so I think quite a lot of British people would agree with Keir Starmer that actually setting us up as hostile to the American government is something that many British people would be concerned about, even if they really dislike so much about what Trump is doing. So it's a very, very difficult thing it's a very, very difficult line for the Prime Minister to tread.
Robert, I want to pick up, though, on something you were just talking about there in terms of the British public's view of America, because Adam on email wants to know, could Trump's coziness with Putin be the ideal opportunity for the UK government to unite with the EU? Is this a chance to repair, in Adam's words, some of the damage done by Brexit and create a stronger European family that we can again be a part of? What do you think, Robert?
So it is a massive opportunity in that sense. He's completely right. One of the things that Keir Starmer continues, though, to stress is he doesn't want to choose between the European Union and America. He wants to be close to both. Now, I've said many times over the last few weeks that ambition may be a bit naive, and ultimately he may have to choose if, in the end, Trump really dramatically abandons Europe in terms of underwriting our security and sort of hangs us out to dry in that sense. But we can see Starmer taking steps to build those, really practical steps to build those better relationships. He's convened a meeting of European leaders on Sunday in London, at which he and President Macron and the Polish president will all brief European leaders on their meetings this week with Trump and try and forge a common European approach to meeting the increased security challenge that we face of, America downgrading its military support to Ukraine, and it's essentially a coordinated approach to what looks like policies that are likely to embolden Putin. So Adam's right. This is a very important thing for Starmer to do, and so far, at least, he is taking some steps in that direction.
I mean, Anushka, I suppose part of what's going on here among some who still feel upset about Brexit is the hope that we will align ourselves closer with Europe, maybe that we'll even rejoin the EU one day. Do you think things are going to shift at all in that direction?
I don't think we're going to rejoin the EU, although don't we argue about that every other week on this particular podcast, because I think they are pretty determined. I mean, they're too nervous to even go forward for a youth mobility scheme, which is
so popular
with Reform supporters.
Yeah. Everyone seems to like that.
But and they've, even though Keir Starmer once was like totally pro customs union, they've completely ruled that out. But and I think we see this in how he's behaving. His instincts are so pro-European. The Brexit was absolutely heartbreaking for Keir Starmer. Number one priority for the Foreign Office when he came in was meant to be resetting relations with Europe. And absolutely, I agree with Robert 100% on this. There is an opportunity here because the global shifting plates are so much bigger than Brexit or anything that's come before that relationship now is going to become, so important. The EU and the UK need each other in a way that perhaps we didn't realise we would do so quickly.
I do feel like the people have moved on from Brexit and they're not really bothered about rejoining the EU, but it's that youth mobility scheme. It seems like an obvious one for him to go for, and it's an obvious one that will bring the EU much closer to us and help us to get a new trade deal. So
I think you're right. I think the one thing with it, and I think this is why they're nervous about it, is it will mean more people coming here. You might have a cap of, say, 70,000 visas, like you had 45,000 for the Australian version. And, people are nervous about young people getting jobs in this country. And so I do think they are worried, and I can see why, that it will open themselves up to the idea that this is a form of free movement. And also, I heard someone argue this weekend, and I do think it's a very fair point, which is it's all very well like, the kind of mobility you're talking about is perhaps a little bit more open to more affluent young people and perhaps a little bit less open to more, working class or young people from a more deprived background. Now, that needn't be the case, but I think it is seen in that way. So perhaps they think that the base that they need to speak to isn't necessarily going to benefit from that scheme.
Okay. All right. Robert, what did you want to ask Lewis?
I do. So I'm very interested in the conundrum that Anushka has been talking about, which is who is the real Keir Starmer. Over a period of years, we've seen his position shift on big politics so much. So I was wondering whether Lewis wanted to ask people on TikTok if they think that Keir Starmer is really a closet Tottenham Hotspur fan.
Well, one thing I've noticed...
Because that would go literally to the heart of probably the most important thing in his life.
It would make sense. People just seem to hate the fact that he never answers any questions. And I think that's sort of... maybe the reason he doesn't answer any questions is because he's previously said something different when he was the leader of the opposition. And now
previously cheered for Arsenal, and in his heart,
and maybe previously
he was down the road.
He supported Spurs.
Can you think of any leaders, though, on TikTok, I mean, maybe Donald Trump, I guess, but who do well? Because once you're in government, that's the hard thing, right? Like, most of the people who are really popular on TikTok are opposition parties, often on the extremes of politics, because they can just literally say whatever the heck they want. Are there other leaders who are kind of in government who do well on TikTok? I'll put you on the spot a bit here.
Oh, in government, no. I mean, outside of government, Nigel Farage is TikTok gold. Seems like everything he says.
What's he got that they love?
I feel like what he's got is he talks. It seems to people that he talks passionately and he talks from the heart. I feel like he can do that. It's because he's not in government, so he can say whatever he wants, and people. Well, he doesn't need to prove that it can happen. He performs really well on TikTok. And on the other side was George Galloway, also performed really well. I think they're very similar, even though they're on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And
Nigel Farage has never pretended to be a cat.
Good point. But
or has he?
The time can come.
That's all for this week. Thanks very much for joining us. Wherever you were watching or listening, keep sending us your questions for Robert and Anushka to talkingpolitics@itv.com is the address once again. And remember, you can view new episodes on ITVX every Wednesday. And if you're enjoying it, hit subscribe on your favourite podcast platform to ensure you won't miss out on an episode.